Good evening, and welcome to our second of 5 virtual listening sessions we're holding on the My Healthy Climate Plan implementation, with tonight's focus being on electrifying vehicles and increasing public transit. My name is Jennifer Acevedo, and I'm in EGLE's Environmental Support Division. And I see we have about 76 attendees on right now. We're expecting some more. We had about 300 register, so hopefully we'll be getting more as time goes on. Before we introduce our presenter, though, I'm going to share a few housekeeping items to help you with participation during today's session. First off, all lines are muted, and we will not be answering any questions in the Q&A box tonight. This is just a listening session. So how it's going to go is EGLE is going to present first, and then we'll describe how to make a comment and open the floor to comments afterwards. We are recording this session and we'll post it to YouTube afterwards, and we'll also follow up with an email with the recording and some links to some resources. So with that, I'm going to go ahead. I see there are still more coming in, but we will go ahead and get started with Corey Conley, who leads EGLE's Office of Climate and Energy. Take it away, Corey.
Hey everyone, good evening. Thank you for joining, and thanks Jennifer and the ESD team here at EGLE for helping us put this together. As Jennifer mentioned, I'm going to give a quick overview, run through some information about the My Healthy Climate Plan, kind of what we're doing here today and how we're gathering input, and a little bit about some of the progress that's been going on here at the state, with a little bit of a context setting here on where some of the emissions are coming from in the transportation sector. And then we'll open it up, and the main goal of today is really to hear from all of you and have our team take notes and understand better what folks, all of you and others are thinking we should be prioritizing at the state. So next slide, please. So starting with some background on the My Healthy Climate Plan, hopefully this is familiar for folks who are joining. I talk about it enough that hopefully it is. But the primary goals of the My Healthy Climate Plan was released in 2022, and it's to reach carbon neutrality by 2050 and reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 50 to 52% by 2030, and to do so in a just and equitable manner. In addition to addressing science and the challenge, the crisis of climate change, also meant to drive the creation of jobs and reduce and economic opportunity, foster better public health outcomes, and address and prevent future environmental injustices. Next slide. So how did we get here? You can see this is a long timeline, or long to me at least, all the way back to 2019, when the governor committed to carbon neutrality for the state of Michigan, and then the release of the climate plan as a result of 6 topical work groups, including one on transportation, that I'm sure some of the folks on the call and that are joining us today participated in. So thank you to those folks that helped really get us here. Then over the last couple of years, we've continued from the beginning. We said the climate plan was going to be an iterative document where we continued to gather input as we implemented the plan. And we've continued to do so, including a variety of in-person sessions last year, like late last year in 2023. And then throughout this year, we've focused on releasing a priority climate action plan. And now we're digging into these virtual listening sessions to really get to a broader kind of deeper and more comprehensive climate action plan that we'll need to submit to the EPA, that is an expansion of the My Healthy Climate Plan and looks toward implementation. Next slide, please. So the My Healthy Climate Plan includes a variety of goals. I'm not going to go through all of them. We're having sessions on each of these, what we call climate plan pillars. Today, we're focused on electric vehicles and increasing public transit, with kind of the North Star goal there being building the charging infrastructure to support 2 million electric vehicles on the road by 2030. Pretty ambitious one. So next slide. Where the emissions are coming from is kind of where our team tries to start, set our goals and policy based on science. Transportation accounts for 26% of Michigan's emissions as of 2021. We're constantly looking to get the most updated data on that to make sure that we're accurate in our policymaking and in our programs. And the latest that we have is this 26% number. Next slide. Where that comes from, we leverage the EPA state inventory tool, or you'll hear us refer to as the EPA SIT tool. It has a variety of workbooks that we leverage for various parts of the inventory to get to as accurate of a picture as we can for the state. For the transportation sector, there are two modules: fossil fuel combustion, mobile combustion. Sound kind of the same to me to some degree. But really, when we're looking at fossil fuel combustion in the transportation sector, we're looking at CO2, and mobile combustion in the transportation sector is gathering the methane and nitrous oxide from transportation. So those two things combined inform the next couple of slides. Next slide, please. So this is an overall picture of where we've been since the 2005 baseline that we're consistently looking toward. You can see a general decline, specifically in gasoline passenger vehicles, and an increase slightly in some of the diesel vehicles over time. You can see that decline in gasoline passenger vehicles, and you'll hear this as a general theme for us as we look at all of the general activities we're working toward, which is due to efficiency, vehicle electrification, change in transportation uses and patterns. Next slide, please. So digging in a little bit deeper, you can see from the bottom here, we're looking at those light duty vehicles and light duty trucks. So gasoline powered, accounting for largest share of the emissions. And then you can look at the diesel vehicles and the heavy duty vehicles. And then kind of the other pieces of transportation, aircraft, boats, et cetera, at the top. It's probably worth noting, when we think about strategy, and part of what we're going to talk about here, and you can see in the slides that are upcoming, gasoline vehicles, kind of everything toward the bottom of the slide here, like we have solutions for, and we need to move toward that efficiency, some of the changes in increasing public transit, electrification of transportation. As you start to go up this stack, there are more innovation is necessary, figuring out creative solutions, tackling big challenges as we look toward some of these harder to decarbonize spaces like air travel. Next slide. So some of the priority measures that we've highlighted in the near term to get to that 2030 target, you can see this trend throughout: encourage adoption of electric vehicles, electrify public fleets, and support just access to public transit. Next slide, please. The climate plan overall has like 50 plus recommendations or encouragements or commitments. So there are a variety of things included in the climate plan. There are also key strategies. You can see here, I'm not going to go through each of these because we only have so much time, but you can see major focus on building charging infrastructure, state fleets and public fleets, calling for the adoption of a clean fuel standard, increasing access to clean transportation, and all with a bit more detail in the My Healthy Climate Plan, the roadmap to 2030 section that's there, and you all can check out online. Next slide, please. So earlier this year, in October, as a part of this process to kick off this set of listening sessions and engagements, we had an in-person session to gather input on how we should be thinking about prioritizing environmental justice and benefits for communities. The major co-benefits here that we heard and have been identified: improved air quality and health benefits, greater access to economic opportunity from public transit. And on the right we had a variety of inputs that can kind of be summarized in these buckets around what communities really want to see based on the input that we've received so far and what they see the benefits of increased public transit. Next slide, please. There's been additional policy as well, the creation of the Community Office of Community Worker Economic Transition Office, as well as some legislation to ensure the sale for resale of electricity for EV charging infrastructure. Commitment for the state, that's a direct commitment out of the climate plan that has now been put into executive directive here to convert the state fleet. And then you're going to hear from in a second the team at the Office of Future Mobility and Electrification, who do a ton of leadership with this with sustainability and climate targets as a key part of the state's broader mobility strategy. Next slide, please. So across all of state government, so our office does generally cross-cutting work to drive climate action, but you can see climate action specifically in specific sectors across all of state government. Here's just a few of the programs. You can see a really big emphasis on building this charging infrastructure out. You can see all these programs here at EGLE, but also with future mobility and electrification and others. And you can see other commitments across the board here. And we're continuing to try and develop additional programs and initiatives at the state of Michigan all the time on this. Next slide. And with that, I can hand it to Catherine Snorenson from the team at Future Mobility and Electrification to share a little bit more about their work and how it ties in on the climate side. Catherine.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Corey. Hi, everyone. Like Corey said, my name is Catherine Snorrison. I'm the Deputy Chief Mobility Officer for the state of Michigan and with the Office of Future Mobility and Electrification. We were created by the Governor's Office to build a strong, vibrant economy around mobility and electrification and focus on safer, more equitable, and environmentally conscious transportation for all people. Quick background, when I say mobility, that means movement of people, goods, and information. And similar to the My Healthy Climate Plan, the state of Michigan has a My Future Mobility Plan that was introduced a few months later after the My Healthy Climate Plan in 2022. We're also going through a revamp as well, but these pillars stay strong and true for the state of Michigan. So our plan, and we'll send out links afterwards as well, focuses on these three pillars: ensuring that we transition and grow our mobility industry and workforce, provide safer, greener, and more accessible transportation, and lead the world in mobility policy and innovation. And then within this second pillar, the two goals that I want to point out are ensuring by 2030, we deploy 100,000 chargers across the state to support those 2 million electric vehicles that we anticipate on Michigan roads that Corey mentioned, and maintaining at least 80% of EV charging off-peak to minimize those impacts to the grid. So we're deploying our plan right now, looking to revamp it based on movements in innovation, technology, already reaching a number of the 11 goals that are in our plan. And then, like Corey mentioned on the last slide, to support the growth of companies who support this innovation, we do have a number of grant programs to support company growth, but also deploying these chargers across the state. So I asked Julia to share 3 links afterwards, one on OFME, that's michiganbusiness.org/OFME, one on our grants program for companies, and the third one on our state strategy, the My Future Mobility Plan. So thank you so much for the time today, and I'll hand it back to Corey.
Thank you. And with that, I think Jennifer can help us set some ground rules and start taking some comments.
Yes, thank you, Catherine and Corey. So next up, we are going to the comment section of tonight's session. We currently have 105 logged in, so we might have a few people ready to comment. If you have a comment, please use the raise your hand icon and you'll be added to our queue. And if we have anyone on the phone wanting to comment, you'll hit #2 to raise your hand. We'll do our best to keep a list in the chat of people who are on deck so you can be prepared to unmute when it's your turn. We'll call your name, and when it's your turn to speak, please say your name and organization if you represent one. And we're here to listen and really appreciate you spending your time with us tonight. Like I said, since we have so many people in this meeting, comments will be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes per person. So you'll see a timer start at the top right of your screen, and as it's approaching the 3-minute mark, you'll see it transition to orange and then red. When you hear the beep, you'll need to move on to the next person. So we are going to try and get through all your comments tonight. If you don't get through your session in the 3 minutes, you can always email eagle-oce@michigan.gov, or if you don't feel like giving comments in this setting, you can still do that too. So I know that was a lot that I just kind of threw out there at once, but it looks like we already have quite a few people with their hands raised. So we will go ahead and get started. And I see that Jim has put some names in the chat. Let me just rearrange my screen here so I can get going. All right, so the first person we have up is Amanda Costello.
Yeah, hi. My name is Amanda Costello. I am a resident of Canton, Michigan. I'm also an organizer with the Michigan League of Conservation Voters. And I'm here to express my support for the public transportation initiatives in the Michigan Healthy Climate Plan. My dad, he lives in like the Southeast Michigan region, and he is carless. He doesn't own a car. He relies entirely on public transportation to get around. And his experience really underscores for me why I really support like equitable access to public transportation that's really accessible. Um, so like about 8% of Michigan households don't have a vehicle. And like my dad's among that, but like nearly 60% of our jobs are unreachable by public transit. This lack of accessibility has affected my father directly, who's a senior. It also disproportionately affects communities of color and individuals with disabilities. So I really just am encouraging like as much investment in public transportation as possible. Talked about my father, now I'll talk about me. I would, so the 2 million electric vehicle target, really exciting to me. I um I would love to be an electric vehicle owner. However, like it's cost prohibitive for me. Um, if those like federal incentives from the IRA could become direct rebates instead of tax credits, like that would make it more accessible to people like me and others who want to be more climate friendly with their purchases. And I think that's essentially like my full comment. Yeah, public transportation, electric vehicles, both like excited about both. Uh, will benefit my family and will benefit Michigan. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amanda. Next up, we have Megan Owens.
Hi, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Great. Well, thank you so much for this opportunity, and I really do applaud all the work that that EGLE and the team has done both to develop this plan. I know how much work went into it, and it's a big, complicated issue. So I do want to applaud that, and I do think that the goals that are laid out for transportation are really important ones, both that develop the infrastructure for 2 million electric vehicles, but then also the goal that's in there to increase access to clean transportation, including public transit by 15% a year. And what concerns me is that I haven't seen much action towards the latter. And so I was curious, I understand you're probably not answering questions right now, but it would be great to get more information about who is in charge of doing that. Obviously, EGLE is responsible for most of this project of implementing the My Healthy Climate Plan, but clearly transportation components would be under MDOT. And I know MDOT's starting to have a few conversations about how to address climate issues, but they seem to be very, very preliminary. So having a clearer answer as to who specifically, and maybe the governor needs to appoint somebody, or make that clear. Maybe the Department of MDOT needs to have a clear, I don't know, what somebody specifically in charge of some of the climate components. And related to that, I'm also curious how MDOT is tracking greenhouse gas emissions and also projecting moving forward. MDOT invests some $6 billion a year into our transportation system, and that has direct impacts on how people get around. A lot of other states have been doing some really exciting work to understand the linkages between greenhouse gas emissions, the number of miles being driven on their roads, and the amount of transportation alternatives that are available. it'd be great for our community to identify something, to be working in that vein as well. And to explicitly to really develop an action plan. What is this state actually going to do? What investments would it take to actually make a substantive expansion in public transit, and thus a substantive decrease in how much people have to drive? Because as a lot of people have, as the last person noted, and I'm sure many will, people can only get out of their cars if they have reliable, affordable options to do that. So I guess some of you guys know, but yeah, I run Transportation Riders United, public transit advocacy organization. We would be very excited to be part of helping figure out what that plan is. But it is going to take some dedicated focus on decreasing the amount of driving and increasing the options that people have that are safe and convenient, sustainable, and affordable. So thank you again. I look forward to continued progress on this great work.
Thank you, Megan. Sorry, I think the timer went off, but it was quiet. So hopefully you guys can hear it in the future. Next up is Peggy Matta.
Hi, this is Peggy. I did not raise my hand, or at least I didn't think I did. But my question would be is if there would be some opportunities when we establish an EV charger in a location in a neighborhood, whether there would be an option for getting a car share, an EV car share that would be stationed at that EV charging system. With the Detroit 2030 district, we have 10 EV chargers that are going in. 6 of them are going in houses of worship in Detroit. And it would be good for the neighborhood because the people there don't own the EVs, but to have a car share would be something that I think would be a target of mine to be able to establish there. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. Okay, next up, we have Ethan Benedict.
Hello. Hi. My name's Ethan Benedict. I'm calling because I wanted to ask EGLE and broadly speaking, what they plan to do if/when they encounter pushback against plans to expand and improve mass transit systems in a neighborhood. Whenever in years past, when I've brought up expanding or using mass transit or taking it as a feasible option, I've gotten various responses that can be charitably described as classist and less than charitably described as racist. Yeah, and in some areas don't have, some towns may not even have a sidewalk network to accept people on buses. So I'm wondering, what is EGLE doing to counter those arguments and that various pushback? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ethan. Next up is Will Dreyer.
Hi, good evening. Thanks for the opportunity tonight to provide some public comments. My name is Will Dreyer. I'm a policy manager with the Electrification Coalition. We are a nonpartisan nonprofit organization that works with businesses across the electric vehicle supply chain, as well as the Energy Security Leadership Council, which is a group initiative with our sister organization that's made up of retired 4-star admirals and generals, as well as other business leaders. And all collectively, our goal is to promote the policies and actions needed to facilitate the widespread adoption of electric vehicles in order to combat our transportation's dependence on oil. We see this dependence as jeopardizing our national and economic security, and addressing it as key for us to maintain U.S.'s leadership and competitiveness across the automotive supply chain. Our group has long seen electric vehicles as, and specifically our domestic EV industry, as the most promising solution to break oil's monopoly over the transportation system. And as our world switches from gasoline to electric vehicles, China's dominance of this supply chain makes scaling up the US market even more urgent. This is why we've been pleased to support and continue to support EGLE and the state of Michigan in achieving their electric vehicle goals by 2030. We've been very privileged to collaborate with many stakeholders and contribute to advancing the key programs, including the $125 million allocated to facilitate electric school bus adoption across the state, and $30 million for electric vehicle charging infrastructure. We're also very grateful for Director Roos and EGLE's support in joining our electric school bus teach-in event in Lansing last month to raise awareness for school districts about the benefits and opportunities for electric school bus adoption across the state. All of these efforts and more will be essential to achieving the state's transportation electrification goals. Working to accelerate electrification of the state fleet, we see as another area where Michigan can lead by example and provide crucial support for municipal and private fleets that are interested in also making the jump. As well, a clean fuel standard will also go a very long way in reducing the carbon intensity for our transportation system and creating a self-sufficient funding pathway for EV programs paid for by the dirtiest polluting fuels. So in conclusion, the path we see to a sustainable and electrified transportation future requires a lot of collective action, forward-thinking policies, and sustained investment. We remain a committed partner to EGLE, the state of Michigan, and other stakeholders to turn these ambitions into reality and ensure that Michigan continues to lead in the electric transportation revolution. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Will. Next up, we have Brian Spingielski.
Hi, yeah, I'm Brian Smigelski. I'm a clean transit organizer with Sierra Club and Detroit resident, and I'm here speaking today to emphasize the critical role of public transit, particularly our bus systems, in addressing Michigan's climate goals. Buses are one of the most effective tools we have for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Studies show that a single full bus can take as many as 40 to 50 cars off the road, cutting emissions per passenger mile by almost half. And of course, this grows even more significant when buses are electrified. And while electrification of individual vehicles is important, increasing public transit ridership can reduce emissions by up to 45% in urban areas. And electrifying cars alone is only going to reach a fraction of that, unless that's paired with fewer cars on the road. Electrification, again, it's highly important. I do want to make sure that when EGLE's making the calculation to maximize emissions reduced per dollar allocated, that we want to include battery production emissions and not just operational emissions, just making sure that that's part of the calculations that are happening. Unfortunately, Detroit has the lowest funded transit system per capita among the top 25 major US cities. And this chronic underfunding leaves many Detroiters, especially low income and Black residents, without reliable mobility options, forcing them into higher emissions alternatives, but in many cases, cutting them off from reliable transportation altogether and from economic, educational, health needs, opportunities entirely. And another important part of this conversation is that Michiganders have 2 times the national average for car insurance costs, and Detroit residents have 4 times the national median for car insurance. So we have the biggest, our low income and Black residents in particular have by far the largest, steepest barriers to car ownership in general. So we could electrify cars, but many of our residents are going to still have the largest hurdles to actually be able to utilize and own cars and own reliable cars, especially because of car insurance rates. This means we need public transit more than any other state while we continue to have the least funded plan. So I'm calling on EGLE to allocate funds to bring the DDOT Reimagine plan to life, back to life. City officials are currently struggling to secure enough funding, and the timeline for implementation keeps getting pushed back. Without additional funding sources, this plan is at risk of being sidelined indefinitely. We're trying to change that. Many of the folks on this call, I'm sure, are trying to change that. But the DDOT Reimagine plan would double bus service, increase frequency, improve reliability, and it would give Detroiters a real alternative to driving while dramatically reducing emissions. Supporting this plan is essential to meeting Michigan's Healthy Climate Plan goals and also to addressing these systemic inequities. Yeah, thanks for giving me the chance to talk. And that's it.
Thank you, Brian.
Welcome.
Up next, we have Chris Herwire.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Chris Herwire. I am from the west side of the state in the Grand Rapids area, born and raised, and I'm also a staff person for the Michigan League of Conservation Voters. I wanted to speak today mostly on the public transit side of this, but a little bit on the electrifying vehicles as well. As someone who's a renter, I feel blessed to be able to have a car of my own to be able to get places where I need to go, but I know that statistically almost 1 in 5 renters in our state don't have access to a vehicle. So access to public transit is essential for so many of those people, and ensuring that as we're expanding public transit access and working to do that we're also keeping in mind the greenhouse gas emissions that often come with that. In the Grand Rapids area, we have the Rapid for a lot of our bus transit, and they've been working on things like their transit master plan. They're getting into the second phase of that here soon, but just wanted to kind of encourage support from EGLE for growing like the support there for groups like bus systems and other transit systems like the Rapid to be able to work on cleaning up their fleet, like transitioning from fossil fuel burning vehicles to electric, hydrogen cell, anything else that decreases that carbon footprint. And then also looking at ways that we can transition other parts of our vehicle fleet, the state of Michigan's vehicle fleet, et cetera, to electric vehicles in the long run, and making sure that we have the infrastructure being added into that to really make that happen. So that's my comment, and thank you for the time.
Thank you, Chris. Next up is Todd Slicer. Todd Slicer.
Yes, this is Todd. Can you hear me?
Now we can, yep.
Okay, good. Sorry about that. Yes, my name is Todd Slisher. I am the CEO and Executive Director of the Sloan Museum and Longway Planetarium located in Flint, Michigan. I'd like to thank EGLE for their work that they've done on advancing this healthy climate plan, particularly the work around EV adoption, EV infrastructure, and just in general trying to decarbonize our environment. Our institution really focuses a lot on education around this, both on climate change, on decarbonization of our economy and our transportation infrastructure. And although there's been some strides made in this area, there are some barriers to those of us that are trying to help that work and kind of pursue that work. I'm a big EV proponent and drive one myself. And the number one reason that many people cite for not adopting electric vehicles is the lack of charging infrastructure and range anxiety. They're really concerned about where they can charge up. This even extends to renters who, you know, if they don't have a carport or a charging station in their own rental complex, it can be a very big barrier. We've been trying to help address this by putting in charging stations at our location at the Sloan Museum. And that includes right now some level 2 chargers, which are provided free of charge for the public and people in surrounding communities. We have been trying to adopt high-speed chargers, but are challenged in that the Charge Up Michigan program, which EGLE administrates, is based on a map developed by Michigan State University for electric vehicle charger placement optimization. And unfortunately, that map is extremely restrictive as to where grants can go for placement of EV stations. And we find ourselves literally about half-mile outside the radius identified by that map, and therefore are excluded from applying for grants for this. We've actually lined up about 70% of the funding ourselves. Would really appreciate them either moving on to phase 2 of that plan or relaxing the restrictions so that it can be a little bit broader. And then also, just as a comment, I'm sure it's been brought up many times, but why hasn't the EGLE or the state of Michigan looked at putting EV charging stations at Michigan rest stops and welcome centers? seems like just such a natural thing. I don't know why that hasn't been done. I'm sure there's a reason for it. I'm not the first to bring it up, but that would be another way to expand our the EV infrastructure. So thank you for the time. I appreciate the chance to comment and appreciate the great work that EGLE's doing on this.
Thank you, Todd. Up next, we have Julie Bryant.
Good evening. My name is Julie Bryant. I am part of a community in Marshall, Michigan, that we have a much different view on all this EV battery stuff than you guys do. Okay, we've had, for the last 2 years, we've been fighting an EV battery plant connected with Ford and the CCP in our backyard on top of our homes. We were not given a choice on this. As far as I can see, EVs are already obsolete. You know, if you want an EV, that's fine. If you want to do a hydro, if you want to do gas, I don't think that we should all be forced into this. We live in Michigan. You guys realize that these really don't run really good in the winter, and you know, you can't put them in your garage. Okay. In regards to this is good for our environment, you know, I feel that you guys and your science are way off. The supplies for your projects are connected to CCP related businesses, which are connected to slave labor. And some of these suppliers have been banned from doing business in the USA already with CATL, who is the company that's trying to come in with Ford. Okay. In regards to public transit, you know, it is needed in certain areas. I don't live in Detroit. We get really tired of everything being based on Detroit because Detroit's just one piece of Michigan. You want to talk environmental justice? Where's the justice of ruining 3,000 acres of prime farmland, pulling 200-year-old trees up from the roots and then shredding them all instead of repurposing that wood? This is sickening to us. Okay, I pray to God when President Trump gets into office that he's going to make the changes that he's promised, take these EV mandates off of Michigan. It's just ridiculous. And I am just sickened by listening to all of you in your discussion because you all are not living through what we're living through here. And it's just disgusting. And that's about all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Up next, we have Jace Bylinga. Jace.
Hello. Hi, my name is Jace Bylinga. I'm a resident in Van Buren County out in Arlington Township out in the country in Southwest Michigan. And I'm also a staff member with the Michigan League of Conservation Voters. So, you know, I wanted to talk about environmental justice and also, you know, my own perspective as a new homeowner out here, far from urban areas. So, you know, my family, we need some help with transportation, but I also want to make sure that we are investing in our BIPOC communities. You know, the Justice 40 initiative that requires that 40% of the benefits go to these BIPOC communities. Please ask yourselves, are you doing everything you can to get that money into those community members' hands? These are the people who are breathing pollution the most. They're, you know, needing the most assistance to get to work, but really bearing the brunt of environmental issues with their health. So we need to make sure we're cleaning the air as well. So now for my own perspective, my wife and I are new homeowners, and we are, you know, we live about a half an hour from Kalamazoo. So that's usually where we go to get our groceries and stuff. So we're a bit away from things, and we also have some farm animals. So we need to have a reliable truck. And right now I can't afford an electric vehicle. I would really like an electric vehicle for so many reasons, but you know, I'm not making a lot of like huge dollar amounts. I work for a nonprofit organization because I want to make the world a better place, and they support us well, but we're not in it for the money. And I want to be able to not only make my home more resilient, but also care for my property. And if I have an electric vehicle that I can, like an electric truck that I could also use as a battery storage device, when the power goes out, it goes out a lot out here. In great part probably because we're not getting our trees trimmed enough by our utility, but that's another session. But if I can power my home for a few days off of my electric truck, that would make our lives a lot better when the power goes out for me. My water I don't have water, I don't have heat. We're working on investing in a secondary heat source. Again, that's coming up soon, but please do what you can to make it affordable for people to get into those bigger electric vehicles like trucks. Like I said, that really is something that my family needs as a tool, not just to get to work and get groceries and things like that, but we've got to move animals around and things like that. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jace. Up next is Todd Scott.
Yeah, thank you. Todd Scott, Executive Director for the Detroit Greenways Coalition. We're a nonprofit that advocates for biking and walking in Detroit. And my comments largely relate to the report from 2023. I look forward to some changes to it. First of all, I'd like to see the greenhouse gas forecasts, not just for a couple years like shown in the slides, but I would like to see them forecast to 2030 and 2050 to see if this plan actually gets us to zero. I mean, 2021 is a nice year to pick because it was still vehicle miles traveled was still reduced due to COVID, and since in 2023 they climbed 1.6 billion miles in Michigan. So I'm expecting our emissions increased as well. I also like to see land use become an important part of this plan for transportation. When things are sprawled and further apart, people have to drive further distances to get to them. When you build battery plants in green fields away from everything, and the only way people can get to those jobs is by car, you're increasing vehicle miles traveled. This is a critical way to address climate change, and it seems to be absent in the Michigan Healthy Climate Plan. I'd like to see more emphasis on mode shift and being upfront about mode shift. I mean, the best thing you can do to reduce your driving emissions is not to buy an EV, it's to drive less or to use public transportation, biking, and walking. We're not considering the full life cycle emissions of EVs, as someone mentioned before. The manufacturing carbon emissions are not included in the transportation sector. So by promoting more EV production, they're actually doing a little bit of a shell game and moving transportation carbon emissions to other sectors that won't show up in this report. I also think it's a bit of a slap in the face that the only biking and walking achievement mentioned in the report is a $3.5 million Complete Streets grant program, which $3.5 million will pay for half of a pedestrian bridge in Detroit. We've lost a few in the past couple of years. That's not going to move the needle. As Megan said, we need to really look at what the statewide costs are. What is it going to take to get these biking, walking, and transit improved, and how are we going to get to those numbers? Right now, we're just looking year to year. A couple of years in the past, and we're not looking to 2030 and 2050 to see how we're going to meet these targets that have been set. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. Next up is Stephen Bratic.
Hello, Steve Braddock here. Just wanted to say thank you for having this opportunity to speak. I've been in the alternative fuel side of the business for quite some time, and it's been quite difficult trying to get in front of the right people at the right time before they move on to another position. And it's been also quite difficult to get feedback from people on all of the different options using natural gas, using propane, using hydrogen, as well as battery energy storage systems. I mean, we're doing all the right things, but trying to get somebody to respond and support what we're trying to do, realizing that even with respect to DTE's current climate position, using their current resources for generating electricity, we are just from a calculation standpoint, we're better carbon emissions than DTE until 2030, but I can't get anybody to say, yeah, let's do something about that and support what you guys are doing. So just getting in front of the right people, getting the right people to push through what we're doing in hopes that we can actually make a difference. These items are also very expensive, getting the right support as well. Even when it comes to the NEVI program and trying to get in these EV charging stations, you know, we want to be able to get in front of all of the companies that are putting out bids for this, because we can actually generate all of the power 100% off grid and not put any strain on the grid, and also do it more effectively from a carbon emissions standpoint than using the utilities. So any support and direction I can get would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Up next is Andrew Smith.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Andrew Smith. I'm not connected to any specific organization. I am a resident of Detroit. I am primarily a cyclist. I'm here to speak in favor of the transit initiatives proposed by EGLE. While I'm in favor of the plan more broadly overall, it feels to me, the Healthy Climate Plan feels to me focused mostly on private industry as well as EV adoption. And while EV adoption can be an important part, as our transportation network is highly represented in the carbon emissions of the whole state, alternatives to driving are one of the better things we can be doing to promote a healthier climate in the state. So I'm here to speak to the EGLE around increasing the focus of the plan on public transit and alternatives to driving. Cycling, walking, as other people have mentioned before, the costs of creating infrastructure around that are much higher than what's been allotted. And I'm here to speak in favor of allotting further resources to alternatives to driving, and creating that as a bigger percentage of the portfolio on moving the needle towards climate equity. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Next up, we have Rachel Rowitzer.
Hello, my name is Rachel, and I am an organizer with the Michigan League of Conservation Voters. Thank you so much for, setting this up and listening to us talk about this important issue. I personally would like to discuss the environmental justice and equity, specifically in regards to public transportation. I think it is really important to note and make sure that you are keeping in mind the communities that are going to be impacted by the different facilities and, factories and plants, as well as the resources that are needed in order to supply electric vehicles. EVs, yes, they do reduce the emissions while they're being driven, but there are still emissions that get produced when it comes to finding the electricity to charge these vehicles. Where are these buildings going to be placed, and which communities are going to be impacted by the pollution that is created by these various facilities? Incentivizing EVs is wonderful, but only for people who are actively looking to buy or lease a brand new vehicle. There needs to be a more of a focus on public transit and incentives for people to keep their vehicles longer. Focusing on public transportation gives people a wider range of options to avoid driving altogether. Detroit is the Motor City. Michigan is known for our automobile industry, and everything is built around cars, and we need to adjust that and the future building of other new cities and regions in our cities. We need to focus on walkways and wider busing systems that go beyond just our large cities. I know a lot of people who are forced out of Metro Detroit because it became so expensive. So they're living in apartments in Metro Detroit rather than downtown, and they can no longer afford to live downtown. They couldn't afford to have a car then. They still can't. But now they still can't get to their jobs that are in Detroit because there might only be one bus station for like a 5 mile radius. And most of these bus stops are uncovered and unprotected from the elements. So there needs to be a serious focus on every single community that is impacted by this, both urban and rural. And I think the biggest emphasis needs to be put on public transportation to reduce people's driving altogether and give people more access to these various things. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rachel. Up next, we have Sarah Lekpikin.
Hello, my name is Sarah Lekpakan. I am a principal transit planner for the Oakland County Transit Division, and I administer our local property tax village that goes towards 5 different transit providers in our county. I want to echo the comments of many of the others who have already spoken. Thank you so much for your emphasis on public transportation. I agree that it is absolutely crucial to meeting the goals of this plan. There are 2 items that make transit and especially high quality transit possible. And the first is land use and orienting and concentrating new development in areas that are already developed and along corridors that are ripe for transit. I'd really love to see that emphasized more in the plan. And also making communities safer to walk and bike within, because how do you get to a transit stop? You walk or you bike there, most likely. I'd also love to see a greater emphasis in the plan on decarbonizing the public transit fleet. There's definitely funding available to do this. However, the vehicles themselves are not as available. And I'd love to see Michigan become the leader in developing and manufacturing those vehicles, particularly smaller vehicles that are used for demand response transit systems, such as cutaways and transit vans. These are certainly missing in the market today. And a lot of the transit providers just in my county are definitely looking for more of these kinds of vehicles. And finally, I would love to see, as Megan Owens stated, substantive and sustainable funding for public transportation here in Michigan. I think the #1 action we can take to do that is to revisit the local sources of funding that are allowed. Currently, only property tax millages are allowed under the Michigan Constitution. And as someone who administers that funding, I can tell you it's not the most effective way to fund public transportation. Most other states fund their systems with sales tax and are able to invest much more in public transit as a result. I'd love to see Michigan consider this. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Up next is Brian Hamilton.
Hi, thank you. My name is Brian Hamilton. I'm a father, a permaculture practitioner, a climate activist, and I'm also a member of the League of Conservation Voters. And I really appreciate all the work that you guys are doing at EGLE. And I wanted to talk about the urgency in acting and getting our goals done by 2030 and drastically reducing the emissions. The IPCC emphasizes the critical need for immediate action. And so we must act now. And a lot of these plans show that there's people determined to do so. And I'm going to echo some of the concerns brought forth by some other people, like our energy grid needs to be accelerated in modernization. We also need to invest in renewable energy sources such as solar, wind, and hydroelectricity. Implementing energy storage solutions at the community and local levels. Stopping investment in future infrastructure projects for fossil fuels. And also making sure we're utilizing the SDGs when we're doing these projects so we're not negatively impacting communities and ecosystems. And prioritizing equitable access to electrical vehicles and charging infrastructure, as well as developing the workforce and training programs for people. Personally, my perspective as a father is I envision a sustainable future for my daughter that is also intertwined and connected to nature. Michigan's climate resilience depends on collective action. So uniting at the local level all the way through the state to enhance our grid's resilience and foster community engagement to drive this innovation. Our blackouts are the second in the nation. We need to address our infrastructure through different ways because the American Society of Civil Engineers has given our infrastructure for Michigan a C+, and the National Renewable Energy Laboratory said that Michigan is able to generate 40% of its electricity from wind and solar by 2030. With these electric vehicles, we'll have to make sure that we're not only looking at how they're able to be charged, but how does it impacting the current grid, and what do we need to do to get it to where it needs to go, and not degrading the environment and communities in the process. Thank you for your time, and thank you for working on all these projects for a sustainable future.
Thank you, Brian. Up next, we have Victor Jimenez.
Hello, thank you very much for giving me the time to speak. My name is Victor Jimenez. I'm a resident here in Southeast Michigan and lifelong community member of Southwest Detroit, as well as an organizer with Michigan LCV. And I'm here to advocate and encourage EGLE to definitely go forth and please create infrastructure needed for EVs and think heavily about our future with public transport. I'm an EV owner myself. And if I didn't have the ability to charge this at home, which is something as well that we need to focus on, the ability to charge these at people's homes who don't traditionally have like a driveway or even a garage or even a driveway where they could park this and try and charge this from a reasonable distance, it's a huge barrier for folks as well. So being able to create that funding for people and for the city and local municipalities to cooperate and make it easy for folks to do so and affordable, right? But also just incentivizing the entire process all the way through, because it's going to be an incredible lift to get us to our actual EV goals without doing so. Yes, we need more charging stations. That's a given. We need better technology. It's getting there. But more than anything, especially in a cold weather state, we need to be able to charge it at home. Secondly, public transit. Right? We should be investing millions in dollars in our buses tomorrow, and we would have one of the best bus systems in the country, but we don't, right? We should do that. But more importantly, I think we'd be remiss to not think about the long-term future of public transit in the city. Once you spend any amount of time in any other city in this country, you realize how bad we really have it. For example, Northern Virginia, the DMV area, anyone who is familiar, they have the metro. You can go from 3 different states. You can get anywhere in about 30, 40 minutes. It's clean. There's tons of parking. It's not this most futuristic thing, but it works, right? We should have something that can take you from Rochester to Woodhaven to Ann Arbor to Lansing to Grosse Pointe in a matter of minutes, right? And in the future, that would expand to Grand Rapids and Saginaw and Marquette even, right? Marquette in an hour, Chicago in an hour and a half. These are all things that are within our grasp, but we're thinking within the box. Just think outside of the box. Please consider, the long-term plan. But tomorrow we should be investing in what we can immediately change and make better, right? Our bus system, our public transit, those things are obvious. And charging at home, we have to address that because the technology is not at a point where we can really just charge it a little bit at a station and expect it to be okay in the long term, or for that to be sustainable over the long term, especially in our state. Thank you very much for your time and have a great evening.
Thank you, Victor. We are approaching 7. Those who are still have their hands raised, we will make sure to get to you all. I just wanted to make sure you don't drop off thinking we're going to end it right now. So next up is Mohammed Patel.
Hello, my name is Mohammed Patel. I'm the Midwest Transportation Advocate with the Natural Resources Defense Council. And my comments today will be mainly focused on potential policy additions and solutions that could help continue with updates to the My Healthy Climate Plan and options to pursue moving forward. First, I agree with previous comments about estimating longer trends and timelines within our GHG estimations as part of the My Healthy Climate Plan. Mainly in order to ensure that we aren't ignoring fluctuations within the data or attributing reductions that we're seeing now to previous major economic fluctuations like COVID. I appreciate the priority on medium and heavy duty vehicle electrification as part of the climate plan. I'd encourage folks to look at EGLE to look at the Next Gen Highways project, which is federal and state level policy looking to better integrate transmission siting specifically for medium and heavy duty vehicle charging along with highway construction. This can help reduce costs as well as bring private sector and road building entities on board with various transmission projects. Other aspects of charging infrastructure, working directly with the Michigan Public Service Commission on various policy solutions to help remove barriers to charging infrastructure. This could include make-ready infrastructure tariffs or replacing existing line extension rules to help reduce the cost of utility-side make-ready infrastructure, which will then reduce the cost of building public charging infrastructure overall. Utility programs, as folks have mentioned, incentives for charging and other rebates can be worked directly with the utility or state administered. Reducing timelines for energization of charging stations, ensuring that there are specific timelines set for connecting major load to the grid, not only so that infrastructure builders can plan, but grid planners have a better understanding of when the load will be expected. Lastly, on transit and transportation options overall, I agree with many of the comments made previously about expanding transportation options. I think specifically EGLE can look at other projects in other states like Virginia Smart Scale or the GHG standards in Minnesota that look at factors like induced demand, safety, and pollution impact in the overall transportation planning landscape. That can help ensure that we take limited infrastructure dollars and maximize them for climate efficient programs. Lastly, should there be a focus on consumer and fleet electrification incentives, points of sale and manufacturer vouchers are programs that are proven to work in other states and provide the least amount of issues for consumers when they're purchasing a vehicle. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. Next up is Brandy Sweet.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, I'm Brandy Sweet. I'm from Green Charter Township. I've been to one of the in-person meetings and I was just on the last session. So some of what I'm going to be saying may be repeated, but in my community, I'm another one where we're said to be getting an EV battery factory component factory. Goshen, and here, we're very concerned, just like in Marshall, Michigan, with, these developments are being fast-tracked. There is no environmental impact statements. They're close to major rivers. Here we have the Muskegon River, which is Michigan's second largest river. The property that's been chosen has over 60 acres of pristine wetlands, cold transitional streams leading right to the Muskegon River. There's no prior water quality testing. We can't get anything. I mean, here in my community, what we get on the environmental side is the spokesperson for this Goshen to come here, and he sticks his finger in battery chemicals and sucks it off his finger and tells us, this is literally recorded, this is the level of environmental justice we get. I've reached out and made complaints to the EPA, to EGLE. I've been in contact with Regina Strong, the head of environmental justice, and we literally get nowhere. So there is no real care here, it doesn't seem like. And these people that are just saying push faster, aren't realizing that it's all of our taxpayer dollars. Look at our forever chemicals, all of these issues we have. We can barely eat the fish out of our lakes and streams now. But yet we're funding big corporations to come here, taxify our land and our air, and we just have to take it as local residents. We have no say, no input, what we're going to be living next to. We get no reports at all about any of it. It's just literally forced. And again, this is our taxpayer dollars that are being used. There's Mundy getting a semiconductor facility. All of these developments use an astronomical amount of water and have toxic chemicals. Electric vehicles, from the mining to the transportation, to the manufacturing, to the recycling, to the completed batteries themselves, it's a fire hazard. Our local fire departments are small, understaffed, underfunded, unprepared. All of these other things need to start being looked at before the force for economic development and just to say that we're the first creators of something. So while everybody's pushing, I'd just like them to also push for environmental reviews, protections, and regulations. Thank you.
Thank you, Brandy. Next up is William Wright.
Hi, I'm Bill Wright. I'm a retired transportation and land use planner, 50 years working in Bay City, Flint, or Saginaw. I've appreciated the support for transit that we've heard tonight, but I think we need to be realistic about what is possible for transit to accomplish. Most Michigan transit service is used as a last resort for people who have no other choices. They have limited service hours to contend with. They have very limited coverage and service frequency, and there are some days when the services don't even run in most Michigan communities. Also, when it is running, buses frequently do run empty, and that really hurts public transit support when people see that and comment on it. However, any improvement to our transit service will be beneficial for transit-dependent residents, and we still have large areas in Michigan that have no transit service available in any form, and we really need to correct that. The vision back in the 1970s was border-to-border transit availability. We're not there yet. We do need to note that transit is not likely to attract a lot of car users because of the limitations I mentioned before. They're just not going to be used to having those kind of fences drawn around their life. In Michigan, a question was raised earlier about who runs transit programs. That's overseen by MDOT. Funding, a lot of it comes from the Federal Transit Administration, but transit programs are just not well funded. In Michigan, highways are the king, and I don't see that changing anytime real soon. Earlier commenters, Ethan is correct that in a lot of local areas, racism really often drives resistance against transit, and we need to be able to deal with that. Finally, well, Todd and Sarah both have addressed the notion of improving and intensifying land use. That will help to improve transportation efficiency by any mode, including transit. Concentrated activity attracts more trips, whatever way they're coming along. And if you're close enough for a walking trip, having a lot choices of what to do nearby is very helpful. I think the more work that we do to coordinate the various agencies, the better this is going to work out. And I just want to encourage EGLE and everybody involved on this call, do what we can to make life better here in Michigan. Thank you.
Thank you, William. Up next, we have Andrew Collins.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for the opportunity to comment. I'm a Kentwood resident with a strong interest in sustainable development and equitable public transit. I would like to raise concerns regarding current public transit funding mechanisms and the implications for the My Healthy Climate Plan. As I understand, local bus operating funding, which supports all 77 public transit agencies around Michigan, has been significantly underfunded for many years. Following each year, there seems to be a steady loss of commitment to consistent public transit funding. This inconsistent funding, it strains current agreements between city public transit agencies and outlying townships. This strain causes city public transit agencies to reduce service times and sometimes eliminate bus routes entirely. These resulting service adjustments, they both disrupt public transit connections and upend accessibility, and therefore affect equitable access to for riders. Without stable funding, public transit suffers. Consistent and reliable public transit funding does more than support current service levels, though, which seems to be the focus each year in the budget battles. It is critical to ensuring equitable access and for advancing climate goals. And that seems to get lost in the conversation. So in summary, the My Healthy Climate Plan must address these structural funding challenges, maybe develop new mechanisms which face public transit to support both existing systems and any future plans. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Up next, we have Kay Lemieux.
Hi there. Thank you guys so much for putting this on and for giving us a opportunity to speak. My name is Kay Lemieux. I'm a regional coordinator for the Southeast region at Michigan LCV. I'm also, I live in Van Buren Charter Township, just outside, just between Detroit and Ann Arbor. I just have two sets of concerns that I really think that My Healthy Climate Plan should take into consideration. One is that we've had a few people talk about like funding mechanisms and how that is really make or break for a lot of public transportation, right? I think that we have to make sure that we're creating sustainable funding mechanisms for public transportation that outside of cars, right? The amount of money that government puts into vehicles and now electric and gas vehicles is astronomically larger than public rail, public trolleys, any other non-car transportation, right? So, and I do think that's because there's an unfair expectation that buses and trains and rail, they have to pay for themselves, but for some reason, there's no proof that vehicle investments ever directly pay for themselves, right? So I think when we talk about funding public transportation, we have to make sure these funding mechanisms aren't directly tied to how much money that they can develop themselves, that they can recuperate themselves, right? So that's my one concern, to just make sure that we have a way to fund and expand public transportation that isn't just tied to charging people more, which then decreases ridership and inherently makes it unsustainable, right? And then my other concern is just racial equity and making sure that we are taking into account the fact that the people that rely on public transportation do tend to be in disadvantaged communities, and we have to take a real meticulous and intentional approach to make sure that what investments we are able to get and we are able to put into public transportation going to benefit the people that are going to actually use it the most, and the people that need it the most, and the people that are going to contribute even more to the economy and to the state if we give them safe, reliable public transportation. So those are just my two thoughts. Thank you guys again. And yeah, I yield my time.
Thank you, Kay. Next up is Simon Rivers.
Hello, thank you. I'm Simon Rivers. I'm a planner with Oakland County Parks, and I'm also a homeowner in Southfield. I'd like to suggest integrating local and state parks and recreation services into the plan's transportation sections. We've seen in some places, but we have seen it in some places, but more EV charging stations can be installed at parks. And while folks are recreating, they can also be charging their vehicles. I'd also like to suggest connecting public transit to parks, trails, and greenways. There are many great benefits to being in and connecting with nature, and recreation has been proven to improve physical as well as mental health. Some of the most beautiful parks in this state are inaccessible for those who do not drive, and I'd implore EGLE to find ways to increase public transit options to larger regional parks, trails, and greenways. Also, transit has amazing economic benefits. It's been proven that expanding access to public transit helps keep and attract young talent in Michigan. In terms of land use, transit-oriented development helps expand access to jobs and healthcare and leads to more equitable communities. And raising a focus on and increasing funding for public transit would help EGLE and MDOT implement the My Healthy Climate Plan. And I hope that there is a change in mindset. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simon. I think we have gotten through everyone. Just gonna give it one more second here. So we have gotten through everybody, and thank you so much for the thoughtful comments tonight. Just gonna do a quick reminder before I send it back to Corey to close us out, that we will be following up with an email that will include the slides to the presentation and a recording of this session, along with some helpful resources. So look for that in the upcoming days. All right, back to Corey to end the session tonight.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Appreciated all the comments, and I know we took lots of notes. And yeah, I'm grateful you all took the time. So I don't have a ton to say except for this is the second. I know we heard from some folks that have been on multiple of these virtual input sessions or listening sessions. We'll have additional moving forward. You can see in this yellow box kind of everything to come. Our next one on December 18th on repairing and decarbonizing homes and businesses. So again, we'll be looking for dedicated input there on the homes and businesses piece. I think we heard some folks identify some considerations around industry, some considerations around land and water, as other things that kind of tie into this transportation question, some of the land use issues and things. I'd encourage folks to also attend those other sessions and think about those, some of those comments there as well. So grateful for everyone for taking the time and looking forward to more input in the future. And you can always find more information online. And we're always looking, we have a open, we have our newsletter that you can sign up for. We have open council and climate solution meetings, and we try to keep everything updated online. And then we have our general OCE EGLE inbox that you can see there. So thank you, everyone, and have a great evening.